Hey everybody, welcome back to Backlot to Banter. I'm your boy Abram, joined as usual by Tucker Hazel, and for the lot content also as usual, Mr. Tanner Dykstra. And we're here today to talk about our Lord and Savior Zack Snyder, because his newest film, Army of the Dead, just released on Netflix. We've seen it, we have a lot to say, but before we say it, if you want to say things to us about Army of the Dead or anything else in general, link to our Discord as usual, top of the description while you're down there. Try not to get bitten by zombies or undead or shamblers. They're interchangeable, according to Dave Bautista. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, ring the bell, or don't. Fuck you. In the meantime, it's time for Army of the Dead.
It certainly is.
Where's this hostility coming from? Is it from you witnessing 2.5 hours of pretty drudgery of a pretty drudge of a movie, if all things considered?
I was gonna make a zombie joke that he was gotten bitten or something. I feel like that was the more obvious continuation of his joke.
I was trying to put out my opinions on the movie.
I want to start with something that might shock both of you.
What's that?
I am well known as the biggest Zack Snyder enjoyer on the channel here.
Correct.
Easily.
But this is my first non-DC Zack Snyder film. I have never seen any of his non-DC work. I would like
including Watchmen,
which
you have seen.
Yeah, but that's
It is DC, but like
Legend,
it's not.
Sure.
Not
fair,
Legend of the Guardians.
Owls of Ga'Hoole.
Owls of
the
Ga'Hoole
Owl movie? No,
yeah.
I did not see the Owl movie, and I did not see his actually well-known non-DC movies either. So I'm gonna start this off. I'm just gonna get right into it. Here's the deal with Army of the Dead. I genuinely do not. I don't even have a thesis on this particular facet of my opinion. I just genuinely do not know if Army of the Dead is a good movie, objectively, quantitatively. But I really, really loved watching it.
Sure. Okay.
Now, coming from a slightly less vehement Zack Snyder fan, some might say opposite of said thing, because, well, I would say I have positive opinions on the vast majority of his filmography. I find qualms with his style more often than not. And I think this movie does so much right that I think some of his other movies lack, but there's still that one niggling thing that is a Zack Snyderism that just is so fucking obnoxious. And it's his commitment to one filmmaking style thing that just goes way over the top. And of course that is the 1 centimeter. 1 centimeter of depth that he gave his DP to focus on within the frame, because every single shot, there are probably 5% of the shots that don't have something out of focus within the frame, which is a very strange filmmaking choice. It is in some ways the anti-Citizen Kane, as people have been saying. But I found that to be really, really frustrating. But on the whole, that's basically my only major criticism of this film, because I think it's actually pretty damn good. I had a great time with it.
I think that's absolutely insane, and I can't wait to talk to you about it. Because for as much as I loved it, I want to give you your space. But I think that this is a deeply and fundamentally flawed movie, both in ways that are characteristic of how Zack Snyder makes movies, but then just as a film in general. I almost think this is like a 2.5-hour distillation of everything people don't like about Zack Snyder, which is possibly why I enjoyed it so much.
I mean, I don't have anything super interesting as either of you to say. I thought it was pretty dull.
Usual.
I thought it was pretty dull. I thought it under-delivered is basically the word I'm gonna go with for this review. Like, we talked about this a bit before in our Discord channel, link in the description. But all the marketing was this like neon-colored slot machines and bullets flying all around, and then the movie is mostly like gray, blown out, bombed out Las Vegas and like dark hallways. So it underdelivered in a lot of those visual ways. We were also promised like this big, cohesive, really fun interactions cast of characters. They were mostly some of them were interesting. They were mostly one note and they didn't really interact in interesting ways. But that's basically how I feel about this. It was all right. I felt underwhelmed coming out of it.
I suppose I should note, I did not see a single trailer.
Neither did I. Which is interesting. I might ask you, Tanner Dykstra, do the trailers, do they focus on the colorful shots and things of that nature? Because I know the posters are colorful.
Yeah, that's what I'm alluding to.
Okay.
But yeah, a lot of the the marketing, the trailers and stuff are obviously trailers have to be snappily edited, but it is like shooting guns, helicopters doing nosedives off of things, giant hordes of zombies and everything. Not
Those were in the film.
those were in the film, but it's not the entirety of the film, not even a majority of the film.
What I heard in retrospect, listening to a little bit of content about the film, is that, Tanner, it's mostly stuff from that awesome opening montage they showed in the trailers, right?
Yeah, it is.
Which, I mean, I suppose, okay, this is besides the point. I don't care. I didn't watch the trailers. Don't care. I want to talk about what's actually in the movie, which is kind of a mess in a lot of respects. I think that it really, Dieter is one character's name. There's like 9 other characters that I don't know the names of. I think the movie has a fundamental the movie has a fundamental issue, I think, with having interesting characters, which of course opens up what Snyder's great at, which is spectacle. All these people are expendable, right? Spoilers, by the way. Everyone's fucking dead except for the daughter.
No. Well, true, but also kind of.
Oh yeah, and I guess the guy
Van Helsing,
Von
Heisenberg,
Vanderho.
Close enough.
Sawman. He didn't even use his saw that much. He sawed like one zombie, not even in half. Like he just cut him across the torso. So that's more under delivering right there.
That's a good point. Yeah. But I think where this movie succeeds is in the humongous Snyder set piece bombast, surface level themes, visual imagery, fucking gods crumbling and all of this stuff. Like this is
when the zombie looks up at the statue of Olympus and he's like, I will become the new god of zombies.
And as usual, that's what I love from Zack Snyder. But I think that why I said that this feels like a distillation of the stuff that people don't like about his movies is that characters are underserved. The plot is very convenient, right? There's a lot, I think, that gets sacrificed at the cost of his strengths as a filmmaker, which I think is going to make this film pretty polarizing. If you already like Snyder, you're going to love this movie. And if you don't,
well, I can attest
a horse.
Personally, that is just not true because I'm not a Snyder fan, and this is I think this is my second favorite of his films. Watchmen being the only one above that, which I haven't seen in a while. I've heard a little bit of weird things about it since I watched it the first time, but I think this film does have a large cast of interesting characters that all, while they're expendable, I think that makes the tone of the film interesting. That anyone can pretty much die at any time. And I mean, I really enjoyed the large cast of characters. I think for me, the characters were probably one of the strongest suits because they did manage to have a large cast of them with only one or two maybe being like super backgrounded. There were a couple that were just there to literally be sacrificed, but the other ones, like, there was a pretty divided amount of screen time, pretty evenly, you know, of course, barring Dave Bautista, the main character, and some of his tangential, but the tiers of the characters I think are really evenly balanced, and it makes it really interesting to see, okay, this is a team of very skilled people who are going against zombies, which is not something we see very often. And I think one of my favorite aspects of this film is that it does subvert genre conventions in some ways. I think the concept of the different kind of zombie apocalypse where it's all contained to one area, that's so fascinating. The way the world reacts to it is so fascinating. The fact that there's a social hierarchy of zombies. What a great idea.
The zombie lore is very cool in this movie.
The ways that the characters interact with it, and we're like years into the apocalypse now and stuff. I think it really sets up a fascinating world that I'm excited that they're going to be continuing to delve into. There are two prequels in a series announced for this world, which is interesting. And I think on top of that, the spectacle that meets with that is incredible production value. I mean, the effects in this and some of the gore and the slow-mo action things, it's fantastic. I mean, it's bombast to the nth degree, but I think it really works because of that.
I can agree with you to an extent. And keep in mind, I tweeted this earlier. It's my favorite movie of the year so far. So while I'm being critical, I want to get it out of the way so we can talk about the positives, in my opinion. But I think the problem for me, Tucker, is that there's a difference between the characters and the world building they represent. I think the idea of having Lily as this coyote who knows Las Vegas and knows the stuff is interesting, but that's what Lily is. It's not who she is. You know, I think there's a difference between the characters themselves being interesting so you care and feel invested, opposed to the roles they serve in a really interestingly fleshed out world. Yeah. And I think that's the difference. I think that this almost feels like the BVS problem of we're jumping into all this stuff without the setup, right?
Sure.
But at least in those films, I come into them with the context of being a huge DC fan, right?
Yeah.
We're not coming in knowing, okay, there's Lily. The film doesn't tell us who Lily is, but at least I already know. I don't, you know.
No,
So
it does quite a few times.
Well, here's the thing, and you can do this with basically any character in this movie. Is it's the problem with what role they serve in the story. Like Abram said, Lily is really only there. She's set up as, all right, she's the Las Vegas expert. She's the zombie expert. She's only there for the exposition dump at the beginning. She serves no other real purpose in the story.
No, because she connects back to Martin in the end, and there's like this whole thing about how she was supposed to get a secret deal if she helped out the Japanese company and stuff. Like there is,
well,
that's just not true.
Well, that's not her. That's not part of her characterization that we get in the beginning.
Well, it's mostly that she's not trustworthy and that she has that hidden thing behind the veneer of her character the entire time, and it's revealed at the end.
Also, that Martin just ends up backstabbing her anyway, so all of that was for naught, because Martin's one singular role is the corporate bad guy who's going to obviously stab people in the back, and he just continues to do that. He doesn't actually make any connections or deals.
Yeah, I kind of feel like there's a character's plot function, there's who they are in the context of the world building, and then who they are as a context of their personality traits and their backstory and the history and everything, right? And I feel like to both of your points, various characters serve some of those characterization elements better than others, right? And I just think my problem, and where Tucker, I agree with you in the concept of like the expendable nature of them, is that it's double-edged in the sense that it is cool that they just die. When the elevator doors open and that girl's there, Dave Bautista having that heart to heart, and like those are great sequences. Fantastic that are moment. Yes, and they're facilitated by not building up these characters so they all have to have these big incredible deaths. Sure. But at the same time, I think that the success of that sequence is, oh fuck, that girl's spine is sticking out of her shoulder, not oh my god, her spine is sticking out of her shoulder and I care about her. And I think that's kind of the problem with the film.
What was her name?
Yeah, no,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I
think she's the character that reflects your point most clearly, is because she's clearly intended to be someone that you empathize with, because she has a bond with it. She and Dave Bautista's character were like gonna be like in a relationship, but then they
shove a romance plot right in there at the end.
And that's something that I think it does serve your point, but also the fact that again we have a 9+ person cast, and the fact that they are expendable and that there are so many of them, I think kind of balances out, at least tonally for me, why they're not like the greatest characters, but I think they are distinct enough and interesting enough from those conceptual things. Like I love the idea of Guzman being like a streamer YouTuber who's
but they
also
only
really
do
good
that once is the
zombie killing. I know, but the thing is, these characters are interesting from that, but they have to be thrown into this larger situation. I think, I don't know. I think the cast is so large, it makes sense that they're not super fleshed out. And the ones that do get fleshed out, like you said, it doesn't quite work for them, but I think it works for the characters that aren't fleshed out because it fits the tone of the movie.
I think you're right, Tucker, from the perspective, especially not only of tone, but you were mentioning earlier, which I think is really smart, the idea of just subversion of character arcs and tropes and everything, because the film is really unpredictable, which makes it really fun to watch. And I do want to rewatch it. It did not feel 2.5 hours to me because it just moves and it is so engaging. It writes itself into, I think, really clever set pieces. The only one that got jarring for me is the final helicopter. That didn't quite work for me, I don't think. But on the whole, I think the progression from set piece to set piece and what they put the characters through is so fun and does make up for the fact that, oh, you're that interesting character with the one character trait that we talked about and moved on from, you know? So it's a film of give and take, I think.
Yeah. I want to quickly shout out maybe my favorite joke of the whole movie, because it's got some comedy infused in it. It is tied into the world. Is that the mysterious president that we never see wants to nuke Las Vegas on July 4th? But the news people say this because it'd be really cool.
Yeah, something along those lines.
That's a great bit. I love that.
Yeah, and it does, in a very small way, contribute to the tone of, this is just a thing that has existed in the world, and it's so like tonally inconsistent. And you've got like news people who are like just talking about like the like rights of zombies and the human what's the word I'm looking for?
Human rights.
Yeah, well, sure. Yeah.
Well, they're humans though.
It's like a political thing now because it's like contained, and I think that's probably the reason I enjoyed the film so much. Is it's such a spin on zombie conventions. Not the whole world taken down. They still have TV. They still got radio. There's still plenty of other cities out there. And I just find that really fascinating, considering what the film sets up. And the literal ticking time bomb of a bomb being dropped on them is a great pushing force. And I think the idea of having a heist movie inside of a zombie movie is also really fascinating.
Yeah.
So these layers of interesting concepts that, while there are weak elements for characters, I don't think it necessarily matters in the end. Because when I'm remembering this movie, I'm going to remember the bombast and the concepts that I think are so fascinating and well done in the end, because they do pull those out pretty well. The hierarchies of the zombies and the alphas and the zombie tiger and all that's like, this is cool ideas.
Yeah. I do have a question. Tucker and I watched Dawn of the Dead, 2004's Dawn of the Dead. Zack Snyder's directorial debut, also a zombie movie, as the name implies.
Also good movie.
And better movie than this, I might add. I might add that there's also a zombie baby in that one, and also in this one. I think Zack Snyder has some weird thing about his obsession with zombie babies, as I like to call them. But in this one, it doesn't lead to anything, because that would be a cool element to build out the zombie lore more, and it just changes color in his hand. And he's like, all right, I'm back to being the alpha zombie is back to being like the king of zombies who wears a Phantom of the Opera mask.
So I kind of disagree a little bit. I think the idea of basically setting up like a revenge narrative for the zombies is an interesting, almost humanizing move.
Yeah.
It was pretty obvious for me pretty early on when he's like listening to her stomach that she's pregnant, which is pretty clear. And I think it pays off. And I mean, they're zombies, right? But the idea that he gave them this sort of context in which they're like making some kind of zombie child finally, and this dumb fucking guy with a Garrett wire shows up and ruins the whole thing, and then he mobilizes all of these guys. He's on this cool fucking horse, and he's got the mask on.
The zombie horse.
He's going on a revenge mission. Like, that is so cool.
But my thing is, how is that different from the zombies that were already pursuing them? It just gives him extra incentive.
Well, I think it's just the idea that there is social interaction between the zombies, right?
Okay.
They are being controlled by one force, which is a very human thing to do. It's a very, like, the idea of social structure and reproduction, even, like, the idea that these aren't just the shambling creatures, which of course they are, but they have an extra element to them, which makes them a more interesting enemy to fight.
Yeah.
And there's like these other aspects to them that you don't really see. Like, if they dry out in the sun, they just turn to like piles of bones, but they get rehydrated.
That also doesn't come back.
Yeah, that would have been very cool. I do agree with that. But that's a cool concept, and I hope they flesh it out in the future. They need to hibernate and stuff. Like, these zombies are more complex and interesting than we get in other media.
Yeah, that'll be the TV series we get, is the rehydrated zombies.
Also, I think it ties into the idea of showing up of this being their kingdom, and you have to give them the offering. To kind of get passage, and then your passage is probably revoked by beheading the queen of the kingdom, right? I think that's interesting. Almost this idea of like, this is like a society and an ecosystem we have to try to coexist with, maybe, but then there's these people who just don't give a fuck and they show up to try to take it over. I think one of this film's biggest strengths and one of Zack Snyder's biggest weaknesses is it has so many really interesting thematic ideas that are absolutely surface level, that are really interesting to talk about. And you guys shit on me a lot for thinking BVS is profound. And I think that a lot of the similar things apply here, right? There are so many interesting like thematic motifs and so many fun concepts that I wish we could dive a little bit deeper into, which I think probably speaks to why there's so much spin-off material being generated already for the film, right?
Yeah.
Because there's so much to explore that Snyder's like, hey, that's cool, right? He's a big that's an idea that I'm going to include and not discuss type of filmmaker, which is his style.
Is one of the ideas that he wanted to include when Vanderhoe goes on a classic Snyder rant of he lists off gods and devils and everything is time and we're stuck in a time loop, and what is life but everlasting pain? And I was like, Christ, Zack Snyder, can you make a movie without this ever? Can you do it?
No,
I love that sequence.
I think it was fun because it gave that character a specific like role and like, you know, fucking existentialism or something. And also
but it doesn't do anything.
It was pretty contained to that. Well, I mean, he brings it back in the end when he's talking to the flight attendant. So like, it's a thing about his character, which again, the characters are the most contentious thing about this, and I think I'm realizing that even throughout this. But I think the reason those classic Zack Snyder tropey things worked in this and didn't feel as heavy-handed is because the film isn't as heavy. It doesn't take itself seriously. There's an element of camp to it. There's a lot of fun
Yeah.
musical sequences, and the tone is a lot more is higher. And so those things don't necessarily, they don't bog it down. They just, I don't know. But I think that's the reason it works a little bit better for me than BVS, which certainly tonally is consistent, but it focuses very heavily on that all throughout.
Mm-hmm. I did like all the needle drops in this. I do appreciate Zack Snyder just going anti-subtleism with the Cranberries zombie needle drop at the end. Mwah. Beautiful stuff, Zack.
Yeah, I would just want to shout out the Viva Las Vegas
Oh,
sequence,
yeah.
which is just so
That was great.
awesome. Which also really picked up the film for me because I think that the cold open is pretty bad. I think my least favorite part of the film is that beginning with
Sure.
just a roadhead leads to the
A
the zombie
blowjob,
apocalypse.
as Tucker told or Snapchatted me this morning. A blowjob caused the zombie apocalypse.
Like it's kind of funny, but I just don't. I think that dialogue is pretty bad between those
Yeah.
drivers and that whole thing. Once we hit that Viva Las Vegas sequence, I was like, okay, I'm in. This is the movie now, right?
Mm-hmm.
True.
So I don't know.
It doesn't hit those highs for me again though, because then we get bogged down with some pretty stock standard. Like I also, this is my general conceit of the movie as well, is it's more Suicide Squad than Ocean's 11, and it should be the opposite.
Well,
it should be more fun heist and less boring expendable people that I don't really care about.
The reason I would say I disagree with that is because I think the action is so well done that it lends itself to that. I
It's
think this
kinda
is some of the best, like the fact that like they're using guns and knives at the same time and like tumbling around and ridiculously getting off headshots every single time. Like
Yeah.
it gives it a snappiness and like it feels like they're just tearing through paper, which is a really interesting way to approach a zombie movie. Where and usually zombies, I mean, of course, they're just a horde, they're expendable, but they're slow and they're like, okay, I have to take down at least one of them to get away. But these people are just mowing through them, and I just think it's an interesting kinetic tone.
I think if I can compare that to Dawn of the Dead, Zack Snyder's other zombie movie for a second, the mowing down crowds of them is really reserved for the end of that movie.
Mm-hmm.
And that leads up, these people have more experience in the zombie apocalypse now. But when you have these people just mowing down hordes of them at the beginning, and you don't throw in any creative zombie kills, even though one of them has like a giant saw, or you could have thrown in other creative weapons like that, when they're just mowing down hordes of them from the word go, it just becomes pretty stock standard zombie action to me. They're shooting them in hallways, they're shooting them in big empty rooms. I guess the casino fight was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
But it's just mostly them shooting zombies in hallways.
I gotta disagree with that for a couple different reasons, because I think that that action largely, first of all, I think it's interesting that these are all already trained professionals going back to work.
Sure. Yes, I know.
And then being murdered. That I think that sets up a really interesting tension inherently. But also, like Tucker was saying, from a filmmaking perspective, I think there are so many great set pieces that involve such great actors. So what I was just looking up is the awesome hibernation sequence with Chambers, who's played by Samantha Wynn. I just looked up. She was a stunt coordinator and stunt actress prior to this film.
Okay.
So and that comes through, similar to the way you watch Keanu Reeves work in John Wick. Similar here. I think there's such a kinetic energy that these stunt people bring to action sequences. So when she's fighting for her life and then she crashes through that window at the end.
Yeah, that's cool. I did like that.
It is. Yeah. Okay. Precision headshots and a lot of just giblets and everything flying all over the place. But I think it's A, in these really interesting contexts, and B, performed so well. And C is slathered with Snyder's slow-mo and all of this spectacle stuff that works really well here, when the conceit of a zombie film, like a B-movie zombie film, is all of the gross gore and everything. This is what Snyder was made for. It's the same reason that those fights in Watchmen, where you see like bones break out of people's arms, are so good.
Yeah.
Because this is what he was meant to do. When Dave Bautista is like running over slot machines and shooting zombies and flipping them around, and the camera's moving in slow motion as he's shooting them with a drum barrel assault rifle. Like, those are great sequences. I don't think it is just shooting zombies.
I just wish they were more creative, get more zany with it is what I
Sure.
mean. Because this movie sells itself as being zany. You have the opening sequence, you have the comedic elements thrown in about the world, you have a zombie lore that is being built, and then the actual action sequences, while they're choreographed well and executed well by these characters who are professionals, they aren't zany enough to like capture that same essence.
I think my perspective on this film was colored by the fact that this, honestly, when you look back at Snyder's filmography and the things that we've watched this year, this feels almost more James Gunn than Snyder, with the colorful title cards and the music cue drops and the comedic like slow-mo shooting around and stuff. It's a comedic tone that I don't know, like I haven't really fully experienced Snyder's filmography, but that he hasn't quite tackled yet. But that I think what you're looking for is a James Gunn version of this movie that does lean even more heavily into the comedic elements of it. And Snyder isn't James Gunn, and I think that's fine. I think he did what he wanted to with this movie. This is, I think, as Tanner and I did our research, the first like fully original script he's ever done,
True,
not based on a previous property, which I think works really well. I think his ideas shine through in the concepts, and I'm just excited to see what he does separated from previously established IP. I think it's a very cool future to lead to, and this is a very good direction for Snyder, at least in my opinion.
Sure. I think the biggest takeaway from this film for me is exactly what Tucker just said. Get him the fuck. Oh, unless he's doing Star Wars, just one episode of The Mandalorian, please. Get him the fuck away from studio meddling. He needs to be with Netflix again, where he said in interviews, Netflix was just like, here's a blank check, make a movie. Because Snyder is such an acquired taste for better and worse that there's always somebody telling him, but what if you didn't? And this is just him saying, but what if I did? And I think it is a more cohesive vision because of it, and a much more fun film as a result.
Well,
whether that's
sorry, go ahead.
Just whether it's objectively great or not, undistilled Snyder is the only way to enjoy it. Even Snyder Cut is mediated. There is a much longer cut of that movie. This is Army of the Dead as he wanted to make it, and the film is better because of it.
Yeah, I also think it's cool. One last thing, based on what I was saying earlier, is that I think some of the reason that Snyder's baggage and the controversy around him with his DC films is that people expect a lot going into those characters. There's an established world there, and when he deviates that, it either works or doesn't work for certain people. But this, you don't know Steve fucking Wells or whatever his name was. Like
Scott Ward, how dare you?
Same thing. I got the letters right. But I think it works for me because I don't say, okay, that's not the Superman that I wanted to see, right? He has this fully undistilled Snyder now, and I think that's exciting.
Yeah. I would just say, I don't want to tell Zack Snyder, but what if you didn't? I want to tell him, but what if you did it better? That's what I want to tell Zack Snyder. What if you made the characters more compelling? Sure. What if you made the tones of the film match all the way across the board? That's what I want to tell him.
I think to that point, honestly, and I hate to be the one that says it, but I almost think that this film should have been the 4-hour film, like because our issues are what isn't shown, right? I think almost what Zack Snyder needs to do is take the Nicholas Winding Refn turn into television and give me a Zack Snyder Army of the Dead 8-episode series, right? Because he's someone that definitely excels with the more with the cinematic presentation, but the more long form storytelling, right? If I cared about Cat and these kids who are in the tent, that plot line would have compelled me more. I would have known not only, okay, Lily's a coyote, but who is she before she gets brutally and awesomely skewered by a piece of rebar.
Oh yeah.
But I just think that, Tanner, you're right. But also I like this movie a lot.
Okay. Well, I think we've expended our talk on this.
Yeah, I'm honestly fully on board with this movie and the future of Snyder, and that's something I never thought I would say, but I really do think this movie worked, and I think it's really great at what it does. The elements that it's missing, whether or not that matters too much to you is I think the full conversation. But when discussing what this movie has in it, I think it's really damn good, and I would rewatch it again, which is something I don't say about Snyder's other
Yeesh.
movies. But and that's kind of it. I mean, we have our varying degrees of excitement about this film, but I think on the whole, we recommend it. If you have Netflix, you should watch this movie. For me, the 2.5-hour runtime didn't really bother me. I think it worked pretty well.
It didn't bother me because I was looking at my phone.
Well, maybe that's why you missed some character moments. But
Well, I was already bored. That's why I missed. That's why I didn't care.
This is my favorite Netflix original movie. I'll put that out there.
Wow.
I mean,
Not the Mitchells versus the Machines, Abram
I
Buner.
hate that movie.
Oh. Okay. Well, thanks for watching, everyone. We will continue to do movie reviews for every single new movie that comes out this year. Every single one. Can you believe it?
Nope.
Only the ones that we're really excited about. And you should be excited about them too. And if you are excited about the way that we talk about movies, subscribe to our channel, hit like on this video, and join our Discord down below. Thanks for watching, everybody.
That was a really smooth transition.
Thank you. That's a fun game to play. Which quest video am I whacking off during? Audience, type your answer in the comments below.
Probably
Probably Dances
Rain
with
Man or
Wolves.
something inappropriate like that.
Well, now let's reverse the question. Abram Buner, which quest episodes would be appropriate to masturbate during?
What quest episode is the horniest?
Probably Midnight Cowboy.
Yeah,
No,
That's a
honestly.
reasonable question.
in some ways, but not in a lot of ways.
That's a good point. But only the parts when they have got like whooping cough and they're dying, and
Yeah,
sweating
yeah,
together
yeah.
in the apartment building.
Yeah.